Welcome back, my friends. The month of May is finally here, and it's actually a little bit colder around where I'm at right now here in the southeast. It's a little bit chilly, but before we dive into all the baits for this month, obviously a lot of things have transitioned. April was a little bit warmer month for most of the South and the Midwest, and so it changed it up. Now my friends up in Minnesota and in New York, it was a little bit chilly, I think, and you guys are just getting out of winter. So a lot of these things, you know, I try to shoot these videos every month to give you guys a little bit of an insight of exactly what's sort of going on, I sort of obviously have a better understanding of what's happening in the South, but I try to talk a little bit about what's happening in the Midwest as well. And if you guys get a chance, check the previous video when you're trying to sort of figure out. So my April video would be a very good time to look at that April video for what May might look like in the Midwest. So with that being said, in addition to that, you guys have seen that I've dropped some new apparel line with Magellan Outdoors at Academy. This is one of the hoodies. I have my shorts on as well. So if you guys are looking to gear up for the fishing season, make sure to check them out. We really, really appreciate that as well. Now let's dive into why you are here. The goods. So the number one bait I'm going to talk about this month, man, it's so hard. You guys know me. All right, so the number one thing, at least down south, that you have to realize, or even like starting to creep up into Kentucky, is a shad spawn that happens this month. And it's going to happen towards the end of the month, the further north you get, and it's going to happen in the earlier part of the month here down south. It's already been happening in several areas. There's actually been a shad spawn that's happening in April. With that being said, the number one bait that I'm going to select for a shad spawn is going to be a spinnerbait. I'm adding two, and a jig. A jig and a spinnerbait, white jig, white spinnerbait, or more of like the clearer the water, the more natural I try to throw. The dirtier the water, the more straight white that I'm going to throw. Now the spinnerbait, where am I going to throw a spinnerbait at? Bluff banks, points, you know, it just is, I mean, now AJ Jr. just won heavy hitters, and he was throwing a spinnerbait just like this one right here around cypress trees. Realistically, the dirtier the water, the spinnerbait does seem to play more because there's more thump, there's more flash. This is actually a 1/2 ounce accent spinnerbait with double nickel, so double silver blades. Silver blades, really for me, that is the color I'm gonna select for my blade combination when the water might be a little bit cleaner. If the water's a little dirtier, I will throw gold in there, but it's just, silver works well. You want that flash, you want a little bit of thump, and that's sort of what I'm gonna roll with. Now I will put a swim bait trailer, like a Largo shad in the back of this. You could throw like a fluke style trailer as well, but that's sort of my mindset. I like to put a trailer on the back, but 1/2 ounce is just a good standard to go with. Now, when am I gonna throw a swim jig or just a regular jig? Now, when I'm gonna throw a swim jig is, I typically have some sort of craw trailer on it, more natural colors. And realistically for me, this is gonna be more so around boat docks, around dollar grass, around bank grass, something I can't throw that throw that spinnerbait through. This is thicker, thicker cover, bushes, places that I can't cast at, or if the water's cleaner and I think they're getting too good a look, I will throw a swim jig a little bit more and pitch it out there on those places and pump it or get it on top of the water and normally I'm throwing some sort of craw trailer on the back to where I have that little action, or like a chunk if I want to get it further down. So if I want it up, I'll put a craw that has two legs to lift my swim jig up, or I'll put like a chunk if I'm swimming it and letting it pump, get down there a little bit more to get to where that bait gets down there a little bit further in the strike zone. So that is definitely my 1-2 as far as a shad spawn goes. Also, what's sort of transpiring right now is there's still a lot of fish spawning. And so this is really happening all over the country. It's really been weird because this month, or really the last couple months, we've had some really, really warm weather. But this is the first year in a long time that I feel like we've had a trickle spawn. We've had fish spawning in February. I know friends in Ohio that there's fish have been spawning in late March. I mean, this is crazy to see that, but then you have these cold fronts that keep on making these fish pull back out and go up shallow and pull back out and go up shallow. And so one of my favorite baits for really any time, but for this time of year, is a drop shot. A drop shot is something that works really well, and you've seen this play more so really all over the country. I mean, it just seems like it just catches fish. I remember back in the day when I fished in Indiana a lot more, I was like, man, a drop shot's not gonna work here, but it's just a bait that catches a lot of fish, and it really does well around the spawn. It does well with post-spawn fish. It works well, obviously, with forward-facing sonar as well. In addition to that, it works well shallow, in rivers. It doesn't really matter what you do. Now, the reason, there's multiple ways to rig a drop shot. For me, my favorite way to rig a drop shot is Texas rigging or Texposing. And what I use for the hook in this scenario is I'm using a Finnesse neko hook. It's actually a Redline hook. They come in like a Redline package like this. It says Finnesse neko, like this guy right here. They come on like a little, when you take them out of the package, they come in like a little deal like that. So the key with that is it has a fluorocarbon keeper, and it allows me to have a good hook that I can Texas rig. It has a pretty enough meat to that hook where it's not really bending out, so I'm able to pitch it around like shallower places, and you know, pretty shallow. Like I'll use this in a foot to 2 foot of water, but it keeps that worm off the bottom. So then I'm basically Texas rigging this just like that. And that worm hook right there, that neko hook, Finnesse neko hook, is just a hook that I have a lot of confidence in. Now on the end of this, I'm going to tell you guys some good game on a drop shot. Actually, DC sort of showed me this, and it was really smart. So I throw like VMC tungsten. I'll show you guys. Here's a 3/16. So you see a lot of these, this tungsten sort of comes in. They have a little place where you can sort of, now tungsten's expensive, of course, but I don't know if you guys can see that it has like a little pinching place where you can pinch it, right? You can pinch your line into that little crease. Well, the problem is when you're throwing tungsten sometimes, and with that crease, it gets a little tight and you're using light line, it'll break on a cast. And so you're just throwing your tungsten weight away, which is not fun. In addition to that, so I'll take like a hook. You can take any hook, or, you know, and I'll just basically open up that gap. And so what that does is it makes that crease open, and I'll tie my weight on. So that's what I did just right here. I tied my weight on to my drop shot, did the same thing, and then that allows me to allow that weight to sort of, I mean, you can still lose it because your line can break, get in a rock or something, but for me, that's my choice. Like I really like to do that because you just don't lose nearly as many weights in money. The advantage of using a tungsten weight as well, and I argued with the group a little bit with this, and Mark and DC and Adrian a little bit about it, but I do agree. The biggest thing that you're going to get with tungsten is that return and understanding of what is on the bottom. So if it's hard bottom, you're going to get a good return back into your rod to feel that, oh, it's hard bottom. It's, you know, is it mushy bottom? You're going to sort of feel that. You're going to know what's up. If it's wood or something like that, that gives you a lot more of that feeling of what's really transpiring down there. And the cool thing is your worm's up off the bottom at that point in time. I think that's why I think a drop shot's so good, is like big females will suspend, they'll get off the bed, they'll be like post spawn. A worm is so hard to beat. Now there's a lot of different worms out there in the market as far as what to choose from. This one's just sort of like a watermelon candy, like trick worm style, but there's a lot of different ones out there. I think green pumpkin you can't go wrong with. You know, your morning dawns you can't go wrong with. You just sort of have to change it up depending on the fishery and the water clarity. Purples, never go wrong with that as well, especially in the stained water. So I think that one thing is that a drop shot in general is a bait that's underutilized in stained water as well, like throwing your blacks and your purples when the water's a little bit dirtier, you can generate a lot of bites. And I think that we just as anglers, we've always looked at a drop shot as a finesse tactic and clear water tactic. And that's the farthest from the truth. I've caught them in the dirtiest of water on a drop shot. It works. So generating bites is just something that's important. Okay, now in addition to that, real quick here, I'm going to give you guys an overview. On my line, I throw 8-pound nano braid. This is a Suffix nano braid. I like this a lot because it has less drag. It's not as, I think a lot of times we just overdo it with a spinning rod. I like that 8-pound nano braid. It works really well, it casts really well. It's my favorite braided line on a spinning rod. And then as far as rod selection, this is very key as well. And this bait I'm obviously gonna throw a lot, but for the setup with that hook, I throw a lot. The rod setup, so I'm throwing a medium heavy, 7.2 medium heavy. Now if I'm throwing I want some more meat to my rod. And what I mean by that, I want some more backbone. I want to have more there, because when I'm Texas rigging basically this worm, I still have to pierce that hook through the plastic to hook the fish and get him out of the stuff, or if he's even offshore in grass, whatever it is. So I use a heavier rod in this scenario. I throw a nose hook on my 7-foot medium action rod. This is my Signature Series rod, if a lot of you guys know that. But that's sort of my mindset behind it. So nose hooking, more smallmouth most of the time. I'm utilizing my medium action, super fast tip, has backbone. When I'm Texas rigging or Texposing something like this on a drop shot, I'm using that 7.2 medium heavy. So that's sort of the scenario right there of what I utilize it. A drop shot's obviously something you can use it from shallow water. So if they're spawning, it's gonna be great. If they're getting out offshore, which some of them will be starting to do that, that is a great way to catch some fish as well. Okay, next on my list for some of my friends, even, I'll tell you what, okay. You guys know I love fishing offshore, and this is like the most magical time of a year when they decide to get out offshore. I'm excited. Like, I get so excited, like that first group of fish. Sorry, I got people blowing me up. Dang, Lee from Seek One's hitting me up, man, just telling me all about his time last night. I can't tell you where he was at, but it was pretty funny. I'm gonna tell you this. Okay, I'll tell you this. I'm gonna bring this up because it's pretty actually funny. So I surprised Alicia with tickets to go to Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's cool. I mean, she's fine. She's cool. I think she's great. But so I surprised my wife Alicia to go to Taylor Swift. And so Lee surprised his girlfriend to go to Taylor Swift. They went last night. And so he was texting me about that. So I thought it was pretty funny. We're texting to like big time hunter. I'm big time fisherman. We're talking about Taylor Swift. Like, it's actually, so I was laughing. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. I texted him, I said, "Are you a Swiftie too?" Like, it's just funny. It was actually a really good show. So I thought the tickets were fairly expensive for like, wait a second, like, hold up. But it was good. Anyway, so back to the top baits. Deep diving crankbaits are phenomenal for this time of year. May is probably the time that you're gonna see it transpire the most throughout the country. I remember times even in the Midwest, and this is why I'm sort of saying that. You're starting to see that a little bit right now here down around my parts, like they're gonna start to transition to get out. The crankbait, I just, in my mind, a crankbait is still the best offshore bass fishing lure ever created. And the reason behind it, and DT is my favorite. Obviously, you guys have seen throughout the years, I've caught several big ones on this. I selected a DT16 just because I feel like, okay, it runs about, on a cast, you can get a DT16 with 12-pound line to 10-pound line, about 17, 18 feet deep. But this is where people have to understand the mindset behind this, okay? A 16-foot crankbait, my favorite depth zone to crank this is actually probably like 13 to 15 feet because I don't necessarily need it to be dredging. I've caught them in 10 feet on a DT16. The key is to still have the action of your crankbait hitting the bottom, but not too much almost. I think there's sometimes when you throw like, hey, if I throw a DT20 in 10 foot, I've caught them in 10 foot of water on a DT20, but I feel like the action is muted down a little bit because the bottom, it's just hitting the bottom too hard, you know what I'm saying? So the wiggle of the bait sort of just, you lose a little bit of that. So that's why I tried to select a crankbait for the depth of water I'm fishing. So a lot of my friends in Indiana, I actually throw a DT14 or a DT10 in Indiana because a lot of our fish, they don't get that deep. They're in that 8 to 12 foot zone. So if they're in 12 foot, I'll throw a DT14 because I want a bigger profile if there's a lot of fish there, and I'll throw 14 to 17 pound line. So that way I get that bait up off the bottom more. So you can change your depth 1 or 2 feet by just a couple pound line in your scenario. So like 12, okay, so like 12, I'm gonna say this bait runs 17, on 10 it runs 18, on like 14 it runs like 15-ish. You could probably get a 16 depending on how long your cast is, but I'm gonna say 15-ish. On 17 it's gonna run like, right there around that 14. So on the 14 I'll adjust it accordingly. So that's sort of giving you guys a little bit of game on that side of things. I just personally love the DT series line of crankbaits. They do a great job. Obviously Rapala is a sponsor of mine, but I truly think it is the best crankbait out of the package made for a deep diving crankbait. Really any crankbait for that matter. Just being able to cast out there. I mean, I don't remember the last time I had to tune a Rapala crankbait. I don't remember any time. I've had thousands and thousands of Rapala crankbaits, and I've never, ever had a time where I had to tune that bait out of the package. They are all hand tested, tank tuned. it's cool. It's cool to see that, and that's something important. Now, as far as rod selection, I'm throwing a 6.2 to 1 gear ratio reel, 7.6 medium heavy action cranking rod. This is the one I throw quite a bit. I like that because it's sort of the in-between. For years, I threw a 7.11, and I still think there's value in that. Like, if you're straight up Tennessee River offshore cranking, distance-wise, if I'm trying to get my bait deeper, there's value in that. But for all-around offshore cranking, and in between or like offshore, like even fishing like grass flats, that 7.6 just works really well for me. It has good leverage. I can still move my crankbait. I can sort of like crank it down there and pop, move, making little snaps and stuff. It doesn't wear me out throughout the day. So that's important as well. Like you want to think about that when you're sort of like selecting a rod for that. Now, going into a little bit of what May also sort of brings is a bluegill spawn. The bluegill spawn, some of the fish will not go offshore. So a lot of my friends that are, they're watching this, that are talking about, hey, I don't like using my electronics. I don't have electronics, can't afford electronics. It's okay. Hey, listen, there's plenty of bass still on. I truly feel like May is probably the best month of bass fishing because there's so much happening at once. There's so many things happening. There's fish offshore, there's fish still spawning, there's fish on mayflies, there's fish that are on bluegills. Like, there's opportunity if you're a kayak fisherman, if you're a bank fisherman, if you're a tournament bass angler, it does not matter. There is opportunity for you to catch fish this month. So if there's one month I'm like, you better get your stuff and go, this is the month to do it. And that's why I'm like, obviously excited about it. Now, I'm gonna pick up a rod. You guys know me, I love a topwater rod. I have this is a frog. It's actually a killer gill. It's like actually a Spro frog. I've thrown this one quite a bit. There's a lot of different frogs out there. I have booyahs, I have terminators. This one I just had on my rod. Killer gill's a good color. It's thrown a lot, but I like this just because it has a 4/0 hook in it. If I get around big fish, popping frogs work really well as well. It just sort of, this is a good bait to throw when the fish are spawning. Shad spawn as well. Some people like popping frogs more on the shad spawn. You can go white. If the water's super dirty, I would go more white. If the water's a little cleaner, you can put like something like a killer gill or like a silver bottom to it, because it just looks like a shad. You don't really, I think white sometimes is too much. It's like almost like, oh my gosh, like, but it was interesting. Dudley actually made this comment like last year, and we were talking about this when we were fishing at Murray in that Team USA deal. He said white is the best big fish color, and so I'm like, wait, what? White? He said, yeah, because white is so like pronounced, in like as a fish gets older, they can't see, their eyesight goes, just like a human beings. Like our eyesight we start to lose it a little bit. Not all of us. Some of us still have 20/20 vision all the way through our whole lives. But some of those older fish lose their eyesight and they can see it really well. And I'm like, huh. And so Freddie Romanis actually said to him, white is a big fish color for him as well. Didn't have that same mindset behind it, but I just feel like there is something there. There is something to a white topwater or white baits, like it just, that contrast, those fish can see it, and it does catch big ones, so I don't throw white personally that much. I'm more on like just getting bites. I feel like those 2 and 3 pounders, they know what's up too much to throw a white frog out there sometimes, but hey, if you're looking for the biggest fish in the lake and you ask those boys, you need to throw a white frog. Simple as that. And Freddie makes a good frog too. He makes a really good frog as well. So a lot of different frogs on the market, but typically, well, I'm gonna tell you this. As far as rod selection, when you're trying to throw a frog, if you're looking for an all-around great frog rod, 7.2 medium heavy is what I personally throw a lot when I'm in open water or like not a lot of cover. Skipping around, even willows, because you have more tip there. I have a 7.6 right here. This is more for pads, 7.6 heavy. More for pads, like open water, firing out there long distances. If there's bluegill spawning in those pads, whatever, that's when I'm gonna use a heavier rod, longer rod, making longer cast. And then a 7.3 heavy is what I'll use a little bit if I'm making a little bit shorter cast, but I still need that backbone. So I switch it up a little bit, but if I was looking for like one perfect rod, you want a faster tip rod, like a 7.2 medium heavy that I throw it on. So a frog is definitely something that you can't go wrong for this time of year. Okay, so we went through several different ones. Last but not least, in my opinion, it was interesting because I talked to VD Kevin in Van Dam, and he made so much money throughout the years. We talked about how like live has changed the game a little bit, and meaning what I mean by this is like it's changed the game, like where you can sort of keep under wraps. You guys know as soon as a trend starts to happen, as soon as you're watching a lot, live fishing, and it's like whether it's on MLF Now, it's like it's bass, it's on the Big Five side. We know like, oh man, that's a big deal now. So what he said is he made so much money from throwing a jerkbait for years, like in the summertime, all the time they bite it. And I think that we've realized, especially with forward facing sonar, that a jerkbait is an underutilized lure. It's super erratic, it's underneath the water. It's also a great shad spawn lure, okay? So some of my favorite times of the year, like I'll throw this jerkbait on seawalls, on grass flats, on points, on hard bottom points. A jerkbait just generates bites. Now I do think I see some fish shying away from it more because they see it more, but it's really still is one of the best lures to throw pre-spawn and then post-spawn right after. So if you guys are obviously, if you guys are starting your fishing and it's just warming up, obviously a jerkbait's one you need to be throwing. But down south and around the Midwest and even down towards Texas and all that, like a jerkbait just catches a lot of fish. So it's something that I've had on my deck. I actually have 4 rods rigged up at all times with jerkbait. This one right here is a Shadow Wrap Deep. It's one of my favorite colors. I don't even know the exact name of this color. It's a Shadow Wrap Deep 11. It gets down there about that 6 or 7 foot zone, and it just has good erratic action. But obviously you guys have seen that there's some jerkbaits coming out. There's a jerkbait coming out from Rapala here soon. That's another one that's really good. It's not a deep, it's a shallower version. That's one on my list as well. So this guy right here catches a lot of fish. I've caught a lot of big spots on him, largemouth, smallmouth, and combination of it all. It doesn't really, it just catches them. But jerkbaits are definitely something that you always sort of have to have in your arsenal. But that's my list, man. I mean, that's my list for this week. 710 medium or 610 medium heavy is what I'm throwing that jerkbait on, 12-pound line. Suffolk's Advanced Fluorocarbon. That is the rundown of May top 5 baits. I gave you 6. You guys know I'm always like my top baits. I'm always doing like 14 or 12 or 32 baits. It's like I can't pick one, but I try to simplify a little bit. Some for my bank fishermen, some from my fishermen that are wanting to get out offshore, do something a little bit different. Hey, look, check out that Finnesse neko hook. It really is phenomenal. If you guys check that out, there's also a plethora of stuff you can be throwing other than these baits. So if I missed a really good one, do me a favor, drop a comment below. Let me know your favorite bait for the month of May. I probably missed your favorite, so I want to know that. Like, that's something that's always intriguing to me. I do appreciate everybody that commented. A couple videos ago, we talked about shaky heads, and it was really cool to hear people's favorite shaky heads. I don't, with this last couple months of our tournament stretch, it's been really, really busy, and I haven't really had a time to really go back and comment a lot. But I do go in and look when I have a little bit of time to sort of see what you guys are saying. Like, and that does mean a lot to me. So I really do appreciate you guys for commenting and obviously liking this deal. Notifications and all that good stuff. You guys the support for the channel really means a lot to us. And I don't take that for granted. And I appreciate your comments. When you tell me something, if I miss something, I take that as value. And I learn from that. Because you can learn from, the cool thing about bass fishing is you can learn from anybody. And there's times that you're like, hey, your favorite bait might be a square bill around this time of year. It might be something, it might be a giant crankbait. I don't know what it is, but it's something that's I can learn from and take some value. And other anglers can too that are watching this video. So anyway, without further ado, drop a comment below. We really, truly appreciate it. We will see you on the next version of Top Baits in June. See y'all.